The wind howled through the docking bay. Metal groaned under the weight of ships landing and taking off. Bright lights blinked above the entrance of the great human vessel, the Emberlight. She stood outside the airlock, silent, small, and shivering. Her arms wrapped tightly around a tiny girl with silver eyes and short white hair. The child hid her face in her mother's coat, her little legs trembling with cold. The mother's name was Veli. She was not from Earth. She was from a broken planet called Eurelia, a place now ruled by warlords and machines. Once she was an engineer for the Royal Fleet. But that was before she became a mother. Now, no one cared about her past. All they saw was a burden, a woman. With a child, asking for space on a warship, a voice spoke sharply near the gate. "We have no room for passengers," said a Zalorian officer, not even looking at her. "This is a working crew, not a nursery," another added, walking past. Her Veli didn't speak. She had heard it all before, on Station Vega, on the mining freighter near Gamma Rock, and even on the refugee hub near Saturn's rings. No one wanted a mother with a child. They called her weak, slow, dangerous in battle zones. But this time, she didn't walk away. She stayed. She stood right outside the airlock of the Emberlight, waiting for someone to say yes, someone to give her and her daughter just one chance. The little girl looked up and whispered, "Are we going to sleep here again, Mama?" Veli's heart broke, but she nodded slowly. "If we must, little star." Just then, the ship's ramp began to lift. The crew inside had finished loading, and the ship was ready to leave. Veli stepped back, clutching her daughter tightly, her last hope slipping away. But then, a voice came from inside the ship, calm and strong. "Wait." The ramp froze. The metal halted with a hiss. A tall human man stepped forward from the shadows of the cargo hold. He wore a brown coat with a torn sleeve, and his boots were scratched from long marches. He had rough hands and tired eyes, but they were kind. His name was Ross, the ship's chief engineer. Everyone turned to look at him, confused. The Zalorian officer frowned. "Engineer Ross, this is not your call." But Ross didn't listen. He stepped down the ramp, walked past the crew, and stopped in front of Veli. He looked her in the eyes, then looked down at the child who was staring at him. Without fear, Ross spoke gently. "What's your name?" "Veli," she said softly. "This is my daughter, Mira." Ross looked back at the crew watching him, then turned to Veli again. "We don't carry passengers, but we carry people who work," he said. "Can you work?" "I can repair systems, clean plasma vents, patch holes. I've done it all," she said quickly. "Just let us help." Ross nodded once, then tapped his comlink. "Open a room on deck," Lee said. "Assigned to hammocks." The Zalorian officer growled. "This is a mistake, Ross," Ross just replied. "If it is, I'll take full responsibility." Veli stood still, not believing it. "Come on," Ross said, "before the ramp closes again." She stepped forward slowly, carrying her daughter. For a moment, the rest of the crew stared at her like she was carrying poison. But she didn't care, not anymore. This was the first time someone had said yes, the first time someone saw her as more than just a mother. Inside the ship, the air was warmer, cleaner. Lights hummed gently along the walls, and the floor vibrated with soft power. Veli felt Myra relax in her arms. Her daughter whispered, "Are we going to space now?" Veli smiled for the first time in weeks. "Yes, little star, we are." Ross walked ahead of them without saying much. He wasn't the kind of man who liked talking. But as they entered the living quarters, he glanced over his shoulder. "There's food in the mess hall," he said, "and tomorrow I'll show you the power grid. You can start there." Veli nodded, holding back tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking. Ross didn't reply. He just gave a small nod and walked away down the hallway. Behind her, the door slid shut with a soft hiss. And for the first time in A long time Bailey felt safe, but far out in deep space, something was watching. Something that didn't care if she was a mother or a warrior. It only saw her as a problem to be erased. The Ember Light moved through deep space. Its engines hummed softly like a heartbeat. Inside, the crew worked in silence, focused, trained, and efficient. But now, something new moved through its halls. Something unexpected, small, and full of life. Her name was Mira, a tiny girl with silver eyes and quick feet. She didn't talk much, but she watched everything. The blinking lights, the sliding doors, the tall crew members. She remembered every hallway, every panel, every sound. Some crew members didn't like her. "She doesn't belong here," grumbled the Zalorian guard. "This is a warship, not a playground," whispered the communications officer. But Ross, the human engineer, said nothing. He had made a choice and he never explained his reasons. To anyone, Bailey worked hard. Every morning, she cleaned the engine bay, helped Ross in the lower decks. She asked no questions, caused no problems. Her hands were quick, and her eyes sharp in the dark tunnels of the Ember Light. She moved like she had lived there for years, but Myra was different. She didn't want to sit still. She wandered. One morning, Myra disappeared. Bailey searched everywhere: mess hall, storage bay, even behind crates. Her heart pounded with fear. "Myra," she called. "Where are you?" Ross found her in the control room. She was sitting on the floor near an open panel, her tiny fingers playing with wires. Two officers stood nearby. Shocked, she bypassed the lock system. One whispered, "And she's only ... what? 6. Ross crouched beside Mira. "What are you doing, little one?" Mira looked up, eyes calm. "This wire was broken, so I moved it here," she said softly. The system beeped, then glowed green. Ross raised an eyebrow. "You just rerouted the comms." "Relay," Mira blinked. "Was that bad?" That evening, Bailey stood in front of Ross. Ashamed, "I will keep her with me." "Always," she said. She didn't mean harm. Ross stared at her for a long time, then said, "She's not dangerous. She's brilliant." Word spread quickly. Through the ship, the girl had fixed a relay system no one even noticed was broken. And that was just the start. 1 week later, a sensor malfunction caused the gravity in the cargo hold to go wild. Tools floated midair. Crates crashed into each other. The systems officer panicked, but Mira was already there. She crawled into a narrow shaft and manually shut off the faulty stabilizer. The gravity returned to normal before anyone even reached the control panel. Some crew began to smile when they saw her. One alien even gave her a glowing candy stick and said, "Smart little thing, aren't you?" But not everyone was pleased. The Zalorian officer, Jarn, remained cold. "She is not trained," he said. "She is not safe." Ross replied, "She's learning." "And she's helping, but she's a child," Jarn hissed. "This is war space." Ross didn't argue. He just walked away. Later that night, Bailey sat in her quarters with Mira, curled beside her. She brushed her daughter's hair gently. "You must not touch wires again unless I say, understand." Mira nodded slowly. "But I like fixing things." Mama Bailey smiled sadly. "I know, little star. But this world is not kind to girls like you." Elsewhere, Ross stood in the ship's core, staring at an old damage report. He remembered a mission. Years ago, one where a child genius had saved a colony. That child had died because no one believed in her. He wouldn't let that happen again. Not this time. The next day, Ross called Myra and Bailey to the lower deck. He opened a panel on the wall and pointed. "This system is old," he said. "I need a second pair of Handsteiny ones." Mira's eyes lit up, and Bailey looked unsure. Ross added, "Only if you allow it." Bailey looked at her daughter, then at Ross, and nodded. "Just teach her the safe way." From that day, Mira became something strange to the Emberlight. Not a passenger, not crew, but something new hope. She didn't wear a uniform, but she wore a tool belt. She didn't carry a weapon, but she carried light. And every crew member who passed her began to feel it. The warship felt warmer, but above them, in the shadows of the galaxy, danger was moving. An enemy ship had spotted Emberlight's travel path, and it had scanned the crew list. There was someone aboard they didn't expect. A forgotten name, a Geralian female. Marked long ago as a fugitive, they would come for her soon. But this time, Vayli wouldn't run. She had her daughter, she had a ship, and maybe she finally had a family too. The Emberlight flew quiet through Sector D-17. Stars blinked like cold eyes outside the ship. Inside, the crew worked in shifts, checking systems, scanning signals, logging data. Everything felt normal, until the power flickered. First, it was just a soft dimming of the lights. Then the floor shivered under everyone's boots. A sharp alarm echoed through the hull's engine core disturbance. The ship's emergency lights turned red. Ross rushed to engineering. Vayli followed close behind. Smoke curled from a panel near the fusion coils. Crew shouted, powers dropping, core temperature rising. Another voice yelled, automatic cooling is off. Ross slammed open the control panel, typing fast. Something's wrong with the main conduit, he muttered. This isn't a normal fault. Then came the words that made the entire room stop. Sabotage, whispered a technician, his face pale. It's been tampered with, this wasn't an accident. Jarn, the Zalorian officer, turned sharply. Check the logs. Who entered the engine room last? The answer came quickly. Mira, the child, was seen near engineering. Just hours ago, silence spread like poison. Everyone turned to Vayli. She held Myra close, confused and frightened. She wouldn't, Vayli said quickly. She would never. Jarn stepped forward. Eyes hard. She has no training, no understanding, and full access, thanks to you. Ross stepped between them. Back off, Jarn. But the tension had already grown. Some crew members started whispering. Others stepped away from Mira like she was carrying a virus. She plays with wires. Someone said, maybe she broke something without meaning to. Ross didn't speak right away. He opened the logs himself. Checking the security feed. Yes, Myra had passed through the lower hull, but only for a moment. She hadn't touched anything, and she hadn't even entered the power chamber. Then who did? Vayli asked quietly, her voice shaking. Ross frowned. Whoever did this covered their tracks, but not well enough. Myra said suddenly. Looking up from Ross's console, I found something. Ross blinked. What? Mira pointed at a pattern on the screen. There's an extra wire. See? It doesn't match the system diagram. Ross leaned in, then gasped. That's a foreign transmitter line. He ripped open the lower panel and there it was. A tiny black device, not Emberlight tech. A tracker, Ross whispered, and a delay disruptor designed to trigger a meltdown. Everyone stared in silence. Whoever placed this wanted us dead. Jarn looked stunned, but quickly barked. Then who put it there? We still don't know. Ross stared at the device, then checked the last physical access record. Only one signal had passed through the maintenance bay in secret. It didn't belong to Mira. It belonged to Officer Drell, a quiet alien who always worked alone on fuel logistics. Ross didn't wait. He called security and had Drell brought in. Drell struggled, hissed, and denied everything. But when they scanned his locker, they found another transmitter almost the same as the one near the core. The crew froze in horror. He sold our position, Ross growled. Probably to raiders, and almost killed us all, added Vayli. Holding Myra close, Ross turned to Myra and knelt. You saw what we didn't. You saved the ship. The crew slowly surrounded the child, not with suspicion this time, but with awe. The communications officer knelt down and handed her a glowing sticker. "Thank you, young tech," he said with a small smile. Myra blinked, unsure what to say. Bailey placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered, "You did well, little star." But not everyone clapped. Jarn remained silent, arms crossed. Later, Ross found him standing in the dark hall near the viewing window. "Still thinks she doesn't belong?" Ross asked, not looking at him. Jarn replied coldly, "She was lucky." Ross shrugged, "Maybe. Or maybe she's just better than we think." In her room that night, Mira sat awake, holding the small glowing sticker in her hand. She didn't understand why some crew still frowned when they saw her, but she understood something else. Ship was her home now, and she would protect it like it protected her and her mother. Outside, far beyond the reach of scanners, a pirate fleet slowed down. Their tracking signal had been cut. Their inside agent was gone. And they had no idea a small girl on board had just saved everyone. The ember light floated forward into the void. Light steady, engine stable, but within its steel walls, one thing had changed. The crew no longer saw just a mother and a child. They saw a crew. They saw hope. The ember light flew quietly through space again. The red warning lights were gone. The engines hummed steady. And the crew walked with calm steps. But inside their minds, things were no longer the same. People now looked at Bailey and Myra with new eyes. No longer just refugees, no longer just a burden, but something more. Still, many stayed distant, unsure. Only Ross spoke to them like nothing changed. He gave Bailey more tasks, now real ones. Run diagnostics on the vent lines. He'd say, check cooling levels on deck 2, and every time, she came back with reports before others even finished their first scan. One day, while checking the broken stabilizer near the heat shield, Bailey opened a panel, paused, and frowned. "This is patched wrong," she said quietly. "If left like this, it will rupture." The repair team stared at her, surprised. "That's not possible," one said. "That was fixed by Officer Wren himself." Bailey didn't argue. She just pulled the wires gently, reconnected them in a new way, and a soft hum returned to the system. Ross ran the test again and saw 0 errors. "She's right," he said. "This was badly patched. And she just saved our lives." Ross began asking questions. "You said you worked on starships before." "Ha," he asked. Bailey nodded. "Back home, before the war. Aurelia, right?" "Yes. I served in the Queen's Royal Fleet as a deep ship technician," she said. "I was in charge of 5 vessels." Ross raised his brows. "Why didn't you say so?" Bailey looked away. "Because out here, people only see the child. They don't ask what I was. They ask what I can't do now." Ross didn't reply. Instead, he sent her to the upper deck systems most crew avoided because of complexity. The results shocked even the senior techs. She fixed a 10-year-old glitch in the oxygen filter. She rerouted the coolant lines to save fuel by 12%. She even built a backup alert using scrap parts and Myra's help. She's not just useful. One tech whispered, "She's better than half our team." Still, some resisted. "She has no badge." "No uniform," Jarn complained. "This is against protocol." Ross simply said, "Results speak louder than uniforms." Later, Ross found Bailey in the control bay, Mira sleeping beside her. She was going over power diagrams in the dark. He asked, "Why do you keep trying so hard?" Bailey replied softly, "Because this is the first place that didn't throw us away." The next morning, the ship entered a nebula. It was beautiful clouds of violet and gold swirling like fire. But inside the cloud, navigation failed. Scanners went blind, engines trembled. The captain gave one order, hold course. Ross and the tech crew scrambled to stabilize the ship. But even their best attempts failed. The maps were too old. The nebula too dense, Just then, Bailey stepped forward, carrying a holopad. "I know this pattern," she said. "It's the Stormvile path. We crossed it once in the Royal Fleet. Back when I was posted near the Outer Ring, she uploaded a custom map. One she remembered from memory. Ross stared at it. This could actually work. The captain didn't like it. Unverified data. From a refugee. Ross stood firm. From the person who saved our engine, our oxygen, and our ship. After a long pause, the captain agreed. "Run the course," he ordered. "Let's see if she's truly what you say." They followed Bailey's path, slow and careful. Twice, strange energy waves almost tore the ship apart, but her map predicted them all. On the final stretch, the crew held their breath as the ship dipped under a thunderous plasma cloud. Then calm, clear space returned. The nebula was behind them, and not a scratch marked the hull. Silence filled the command deck, then soft clapping. Began first from a young comms officer, then another. Soon, the crew stood and applauded Bailey for the first time. She stood tall, no longer hiding in the shadows of others' judgment. The captain stepped forward. "You saved this ship," Bailey nodded. "I only did what I was trained to do. You're not just crew now," he said. "You're family." Mira watched from behind a console, her eyes wide, a smile on her face. Later, said she hugged her mother tight and whispered, "I knew you were amazing, but in the far dark of space." That pirate fleet received a new signal. Target is skilled. The message read, "Proceed with caution, she is no longer hiding." The Umberlight had just passed through a dangerous nebula. The crew was tired, but proud. For the first time, they felt truly united. And at the center of it all was a woman no one wanted in the beginning. Lee. But peace never lasted long in space. A loud beep echoed through the ship's control room. The communications officer looked at the screen, confused. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal." Ross and the others turned. "Who is it from?" asked the captain. The officer shook his head. "Unknown source, but the encryption. It's old Alliance Sierra coding." The captain frowned. "That's impossible. The Alliance collapsed years ago." Ross leaned over the console, reading. The signal, line by line, coordinates match an abandoned shipping route near the edge of Sector Z. The crew went silent. "That route was full of pirate traps and ghost ships, most likely bait," said Jarn, folding his arms. "We should avoid it." But Bailey stepped forward slowly. Her face had gone pale. Her hands tight. "I know that signal," she said softly. "It's an old emergency code used only by Geralian Royal Engineers." Ross blinked. "You're sure?" Bailey nodded. "Yes. And?" "It's marked with my old squadron tag." The captain raised an eyebrow. "You think someone from your past is alive?" "I don't know," she said. "But if they are, they're family." The crew argued for hours. Half wanted to ignore it. The other half trusted Vali's judgment. In the end, the captain turned to Ross. "If this goes wrong, it's on your head," Ross replied. "Then I'll carry it." The Emberlight changed course and headed into the dark zone. The stars grew thin. The air inside the ship felt heavier. Even Mira noticed. Holding Bailey's hand tighter than usual, they reached the coordinates after 3 long hours. No ships in sight, no movement, just silence. Until a broken vessel drifted into view. It was old, really old. A Geralian ship from the war. Scarred and cracked, barely holding together. No life signs, reported the scanner tech. But one power signal is still flickering deep inside. The captain gave the order, "Send a recon drone." The drone flew silently, entering the broken ship through a wide tear in its hull. Its camera showed rusted corridors, shattered systems, and floating debris. But then Nit found something. A sealed room, still pressurized. Inside was a woman barely alive. Strapped into an old engineer's chair, her face was thin. Her hair? Silver blue, and around her wrist was the same squadron band Vayli wore on hers. Vayli gasped, her hand over her mouth. "It's Kelra." "My old team leader." Without waiting, Ross ordered a boarding team. Vayli suited up and went with them. Despite the captain's protests, "This is my mission," she said. "I have to do this." The broken ship groaned as they entered. Every step was slow, careful, but Vayli moved like she was walking through memories. She reached the sealed room and opened the door. Kelra's eyes fluttered open, weak but still alive. "You're real," she whispered. "You're alive." They carried her back to the Emberlight. Medics rushed to stabilize her. Kelra had been trapped for over 7 years, sending the same signal every day, waiting, hoping, slowly fading. Mira sat beside her, offering a water pouch with her tiny hands. Kelra smiled faintly. "You look just like your mother." But the rescue came at a price as they tried to leave. An alarm rang through the ship. "Multiple ships approaching fast," yelled the navigator. "Pirate signatures, they must have been watching that signal." Ross shouted, "Raise shields. Prepare for jump." Vayli turned to the captain. "We don't have time to escape. They'll disable us before we charge the engines fully." Then she did something no one expected. She and Kelra linked their wristbands and uploaded an old Alliance combat protocol. It created a false echo, making it seem like 5 Emberlights were present. The pirate scanners couldn't tell which ship was real. Confused and disoriented, the pirates fired at shadows. Meanwhile, Ross pushed the engines to max and jumped the ship out of range. The Emberlight escaped, barely, back in safe space. The crew finally breathed again. The captain looked at Vayli and said, "You risked everything for one woman." Vayli replied, "She saved my life long ago. I just returned the favor." Kelra slowly recovered over the next few days. She told stories of old battles, of Juralian loyalty, and of Vayli's bravery. Long before she became a mother, the crew listened, surprised, because now they didn't just see Vayli as a refugee, or even as crew. They saw her as a veteran, a leader, and something more. And Myra. She sat beside Kelra every night, listening to tales of her mother's past, her little eyes glowing with pride. But out in the void, the pirate lord who lost the Emberlight slammed his fist on the table. He whispered, "She escaped again, but next time she won't." The Emberlight was safe for now. The crew repaired the hull, cleaned the engines, and returned to normal shifts, but nothing felt truly calm. Not after what had happened near the broken Juralian ship, and not while danger still. Hid in the shadows of space, Vayli tried to act normal. She worked during the day, helped Ross with ship repairs. She kept Kelra company in the medbay, and checked Mira's homework at night. But something in her heart felt uneasy. She kept looking over her shoulder like something was coming. Ross noticed it too. He had tightened all internal security checks, locked down engineering access, even made Myra a small tracking bracelet just in case. Vayli had smiled when he gave it to her, but her eyes were full of fear. Then came Station Zatanine, a peaceful trade stop near the edge of human space. The Emberlight docked for supplies, fuel, food, medicine. Ross needed parts, and the captain approved a 6-hour stop. The crew spread out, walking the station halls. Mira begged to go with Vayli, but she was too tired. "Rest with Auntie Kelra," Vayli said, brushing her daughter's hair. "I'll be back before dinner. Promise." Myra nodded and stayed in the ship's medbay, curled beside the old Juralian. Woman Vayli walked into the station's market. Colorful lights flashed above her. Voices shouted from every booth. She moved quickly, just fuel cells, wiring packs, nothing more. Then her "Come Buzz Dan" emergency alert from the Emberlight. She pressed it with shaking hands. Ross's voice came through, low and sharp. "Valley Mira's gone." Her heart stopped. She dropped everything and ran through the crowd, past confused shoppers. Back to Dock 42, she reached the ship, panting, and burst into the medbay. The bed was empty. Kelra sat frozen. Tears in her eyes, I turned away. For 1 second, she whispered. Just 1 second. Ross met her at the corridor. I checked the logs, he said quickly. She walked out with someone in a security uniform. Except? That person doesn't exist. Vayli felt her. Knees weaken, her baby gone, taken by someone hiding his crew. Who would do this? She asked, her voice shaking with fury and fear. Ross's jaw tightened. Pirates? Most likely. Sent to finish what they started, the captain wanted to wait. Follow protocol, but Vayli didn't wait. She stormed into the station's underground zone. She knew where to look, cold black markets. Smugglers, halls, whisper rooms. This wasn't her first time searching in shadows. Ross followed her, never questioning. At one small tech booth, Vayli slammed her fist on the table. Who bought? A child in the last hour. She demanded. The vendor pretended not to understand till Ross showed his blaster. Talk, he said coldly. The vendor pointed to a private hangar near the outer rim of the station. They just left a black freighter with no ID. Vayli turned without a word. She ran faster than she ever had. Her boots pounded the floor. Her breath sharp and hard. Her baby was out there. And time was running out. They reached the hangar and found the freighter still powering up. Security bots blocked the entrance, but Ross hacked them in seconds. Vayli climbed aboard without fear. Her eyes blazing, inside, she moved like a shadow. 2 men stood near the cargo hold, talking about payment and silent buyers. They never saw her coming. Vayli struck with a broken wrench, fast and hard. Ross took out the second guard with a stun blast. They kicked down the cargo hold door. There tied up and scared was Myra, her eyes wide with tears, her small voice cracked. Mama. Vayli ran to her, cutting the cords, lifting her into her arms. I'm here, little star, she whispered. Mama's here. Ross locked the freighter controls and sent a warning to Station Zaytane. Pirate kidnappers aboard. Lock them. Down, back on the Emberlight, the crew stood in silence as Vayli returned with Mira. Not one person said a word till the captain stepped forward. He looked at the child, then at Vayli, and nodded. You saved her again. Ross crouched beside Myra. You okay? He asked softly. Myra gave a tiny nod. They said, you wouldn't come. Ross smiled. Then they don't know your mother. Later that night, Vayli sat beside Myra's bed, watching her sleep. Her hands were still shaking, her heart still racing. But she knew one thing now. If anyone ever touched her daughter again, she would burn stars to get her back. And somewhere out in space, the pirate lord received a broken message. Target escaped again. He slammed his metal fist into the screen. This isn't over, he growled. She made it personal. Now so will I. The Emberlight drifted through silent space. Its hull showed new scars, but its engines were stronger than ever. Inside, the crew moved with purpose. They were not the same people who once looked away from a mother and child at the airlock. Now they looked toward her for leadership, for courage, for calm and chaos. Vayli stood in the center of engineering. She checked systems, gave orders, and answered questions with ease. She no longer hid behind Ross or waited for permission. She had earned her place, and everyone knew it. Kelra had healed enough to walk the halls again. She often sat with Mira, teaching her the ancient codes of the Juralian engineers and Myra. She wore a tiny tool belt now, built by Ross himself. She was no longer the child. She was Mira, junior assistant tech, full of spark and curiosity. One morning, an alert came through the main console. A distress call, not a trap this time, but real. A colony freighter had been attacked by pirates and was drifting near a mining belt. The Emberlight was the closest ship, but far outnumbered by the enemy vessels. The captain called a meeting. We can run or we can help, he said. But if we stay, we fight outnumbered 5-1. No one spoke until Veli stepped forward. "We don't run," she said simply. "Not anymore." The crew looked at her, waiting. She walked to the table and pulled up a map of the asteroid field. "We used this belt to our advantage," she explained. "Split the ship into power cells, fake signals, trap them in the rocks." Ross nodded. "It could work. But it's risky." Veli looked him in the eyes. "So was taking me in." The captain turned to the crew. All in favor. Every hand rose, even Jarn's. No one hesitated. They prepared in silence, like a family that knew each other's. Movements, Veli gave orders to the engine room. Ross armed the weapon arrays. Myra helped load drones with decoys. Kelra programmed the final fake distress codes to lure the pirates in. The moment came, fast 6 enemy ships entered the field. They laughed on open comms, mocking Emberlight's tiny size. "Give up the refugees," one pirate growled. "We'll make it quick." Veli stood at the center console. "No," she said, "you'll stay in pieces." With a wave of her hand, the plan began. Emberlight split, its signals appearing in 3 places at once. Decoy drones flew fast. Diving into the rocks and vanishing, the pirates followed, and the first 2 exploded. Caught in asteroid traps rigged by Veli and Ross, the others panicked, firing blindly. Emberlight danced between them like a ghost. Mira cheered from the control deck. "That's 3 down." The remaining ships tried to flee. But Kelra had already closed the field behind them, using the belt's natural gravity to bend their path. One by one, they fell until only silence remained. The colony freighter was saved. Its people were injured, scared, but alive. When they saw the Emberlight and the woman who led it, they bowed in respect. "You're Geralian," one said softly. "We thought your kind were gone." Veli helped lift a child from the wreckage. She smiled and said, "We're still here. Just harder to see now." Back on Emberlight, the crew gathered for a quiet dinner. The captain raised his mug. "To survivors," he said, "and to the ones who made us better." He turned to Veli. "I was wrong about you," he said. "You didn't just join this crew. You made this crew." Ross stood beside her, smiling. Kelra placed a hand on her shoulder, and Mira. She climbed onto the table and raised her tiny mug. "To my mama," she shouted, "the strongest woman in space." Laughter filled the room. No one argued, no one doubted it. Veli looked around and saw faces that once feared her, now shining with pride. She had come aboard as a burden. Now she stood as a leader. Not because she asked for power, but because she earned respect. One act at a time, the Emberlight flew on into deeper space, into new danger, into new hope. And wherever it went, the stories followed. Stories of the single mother who saved. A warship who raised a daughter in the heart of steel, and who reminded everyone that strength isn't about weapons or armor. It's about love, loyalty, and never giving up even when the airlock is about to close.